In the nightmare expanse of Warhammer 40k, survival is measured in brutality, and power is a currency soaked in blood. For every roaring psyker or unstoppable space marine, there exists an opposite, the blank. A genetic fluke so rare it warps the rules of reality itself. Understanding every blank power level isn't just an exercise in hierarchy. It determines who lives, who dies, and what horrors are unleashed in a galaxy forever at war. But in a universe where a single pariah can drop psychic casualty rates or fracture reality, why do the lowest ranked blanks fade into obscurity while legends can doom a world? The true danger of hierarchy is about to be revealed. The Milky Way in Warhammer 40,000 is not just a galaxy, it's a cosmic meat grinder. Picture millions of battlefronts, each one a furnace that devours entire civilizations. Human life is so cheap that it's measured in the trillions, and even that isn't enough to plug the holes in the Imperium's defenses. On one side, you've got teeming hive worlds where the sun never rises, just endless fog and the sound of distant artillery. On the other, demon worlds where reality melts, and the laws of physics are more polite suggestion than a rule. Every planet is a fortress or a tomb or both. There are Xenos empires older than Earth's fossil record, and some of them think nothing of eating stars for breakfast. The Tyranids roll in from the darkness between galaxies, stripping biospheres down to the bedrock. Orcs, green-skinned lunatics infest every shadow, fighting endless wars, just because they think it's fun. And then there's the warp, a parallel dimension of pure psychic madness, home to gods that feed in suffering and hope alike. The warp doesn't just threaten armies, it threatens the concept of cause and effect. One bad warp storm and a whole sector might vanish, or worse, come back wrong. For the Imperium, survival isn't about winning. It's about losing a little slower than everyone else. The bureaucracy is so vast that entire planets can disappear in the paperwork. Orders take centuries to arrive. The only constant is conflict against heretics, mutants, demons, and things that don't even have names. And the only thing more dangerous than the enemy outside is the enemy within. In this environment, power isn't just about who has the biggest gun. It's about who can resist being wiped out by the next psychic hurricane, or who can keep their mind intact when a demon whispers in the dark. Hierarchies aren't a luxury, they're life support. If you don't know where you stand, you're already dead. That's why the Imperium and every other galactic power obsesses over classifications. Who's baseline? Who's a threat? Who's an asset? The warp is the ultimate wild card. It's the source of all psychic power, but it's also the reason why a single mistake can doom a planet. Sometimes the only thing that stands between humanity and total annihilation isn't a hero with a sword, but a genetic anomaly, a blank. A person whose very presence warps the rules, turning the horror of the warp back on itself. In a galaxy where the next second could be your last, knowing exactly what kind of blank you're dealing with isn't just helpful. It's the difference between holding the line and watching reality collapse. Power levels aren't just a matter of pride. They're the only way to keep the darkness at bay, even for one more day. Blanks, or pariahs if you want to sound extra ominous, are the rarest genetic lottery winners in the galaxy. Except the prize is making everyone around you feel like they just walked into a funeral. The pariah gene is so rare that you would have to sift through billions of humans to find even one. Most people never meet a blank. Most people do not want to. Here's how the scale starts. Baseline humanity. The vast, tragic majority. Regular guardsmen, administratum scribes. Even the guy who has been stuck in a Hablock paperwork loop for 50 years. No special aura, no psychic weirdness, just one heartbeat away from being eaten by a Tyranid or turned inside out by a warp storm. Baseline is level 0. Congratulations, you are alive. But you are not warping reality or shutting down demons. Your laser gun is about as effective as harsh language, and your best defense against the warp is hoping it ignores you. But every so often something goes wrong, or right, depending on who you ask. A child is born who feels like a hole in the world. Not a psyker, not a mutant, but the opposite, a blank. At the lowest rung, these Sigma-class blanks do not even get a badge. Their null aura barely registers. Maybe the local psyker gets a headache when they walk by. Maybe their classmates avoid them without knowing why. Most Sigma blanks live and die without anyone realizing what they are, except for the odd Inquisitor with a migraine and a suspicion. Take Elizabeth McQueen, for example. In her early days, she was just another face in the crowd, except the crowd always seemed to thin out around her. Her journals are a masterclass in awkward isolation. Friends forget her, psychers get dizzy, and even the air seems to go stale when she is around. Not enough to set off alarms, but enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Eisenhorn, the famously unflappable Inquisitor, once described her presence as a cold draft in a locked room. That is level 0 to low tier. You are not melting faces, but you are definitely not getting invited to parties. Low-tier blanks are the ultimate social outcasts. The Imperium barely acknowledge them unless someone notices the pattern. Psychers get sick, rituals fizzle, demons avoid entire city blocks. Sometimes the Ordo Hereticus scoops them up for study, or, if they are unlucky, for disposal. But most drift through life as a living blind spots, the mildest possible answer to the horrors of the warp. It is a lonely existence, but in a galaxy that treats a difference as a death sentence, sometimes being overlooked is the only way to survive. So that is the bottom rung, baseline humanity, then the first faint ripple of the pariah gene. No thunderbolts, no heroics, just a subtle, creeping absence that hints at the power waiting further up the ladder. Mid-tier blanks are where things start getting interesting and terrifyingly practical for the Imperium. Forget the social outcasts and the living mood killers, now we're talking about sanctioned assets. These are the blanks that actually get a badge, a serial number, and sometimes, if they're lucky, a meal that isn't recycled protein paste. The most famous of the bunch? Culexus assassins. The Officio Assassinorum doesn't waste time on half measures. If you're a Culexus candidate, you're not just a blank. You're a walking psychic black hole, trained to weaponize that absence like it's a chainsword to the face of the warp. On the battlefield, a Culexus squad isn't subtle. Deploy them into a war zone infested with enemy psychers, and watch as rituals collapse. Demons flicker out, and the bravest sorcerers start seeing their own shadows run away. There's no official stat sheet, but after-action reports from places like Beta Garmin read like horror stories for anyone with a third eye. Psyker casualties drop, not because they're fighting harder, but because their powers just stop working. 1 minute, they're hurling fireballs. The next, they're clutching their heads, screaming, or just quietly dying as the null aura eats through their soul. It's not just the enemy who feels it. Friendly troops describe the air going cold, colors leaching out of the world, and a silence so deep it feels like you're underwater. Some guardsmen swear that time itself slows down when a Culexus walks past. Others just try not to look at them, which is fair, because most people can't even remember a blank's face 5 minutes after seeing it. The psychological toll is real. In some campaigns, the presence of null squads kept demonic incursions at bay, but the price was a spike in friendly fire paranoia, and a lot of soldiers requesting transfers to literally anywhere else. The Sisters of Silence operate in a similar bracket. Their null fields overlap, forming psychic dead zones that can stretch across whole corridors or bunker complexes. During the Beta Garmin campaign, Sisterhood action logs mentioned pariah detachments holding the line where entire regiments had already broken. Possession rates plummeted, and cultist uprisings fizzled out before they could even start chanting. There's no neat percentage to slap on the effect, but commanders started requesting null support every time a warp storm so much as sneezed in their direction. Mid-tier blanks aren't legends or horror stories. They're standard kit for the worst jobs in the galaxy. Their presence is a tactical asset, a force multiplier against psychic threats, and sometimes the only reason a regiment makes it home at all. But nobody ever lines up to thank them. In the grim dark of the far future, being useful just means you'll be sent to the next hellhole even faster, and for the blanks in the middle, that's about as good as it gets. High-tier blanks are where the room temperature drops, the lights flicker, and even the bravest psychers start getting nervous nosebleeds. These aren't your average Culexus recruits or Sisters of Silence on patrol. This is the level where a single operator can silence a battlefield, or if things go wrong, force an entire inquisitorial conclave to hit the panic button. The Imperium doesn't just keep tabs on these assets. It cages them, monitors them, and, if necessary, puts them down. Culexus assassins at this level don't walk into a war zone. They're unleashed. There's a reason the Officio Assassinorum keeps their files locked tighter than a black ship's vault. One high-tier Culexus can turn a sorceress warband into a pile of twitching bodies in seconds. Officially, they're deployed only when psychic threats have reached critical mass. Unofficially, the Inquisition would rather lose a planet than risk a Culexus going rogue. After-action reports from places like the Predator incident read like horror anthologies. Survivors, if you can call them that, describe a sensation like reality itself will be being peeled away. Psychers collapse, demons flicker out, and even hardened chaos, champions drop their weapons and beg for mercy. Friendly troops aren't immune either. There are documented cases where guardsmen started shooting at their own null support, convinced they were facing some new kind of demon. The psychological fallout can last years, if anyone makes it out at all. Oversight at this tier is more than paperwork. Culexus assassins live in isolation tanks, surrounded by neural dampeners and layers of failsafes. Their handlers are trained to activate self-destruct charges if containment fails. The Inquisition maintains standing kill orders for any blank whose aura starts expanding or whose mental stability starts to slip. There's no such thing as a retired high-tier blank. You're either in the field, in a cell, or in an unmarked grave. The risk isn't just to the enemy. If a null field grows too strong, it can destabilize the local warp, disrupt astropathic communications, and even cause reality faults, tears in the fabric of space that swallows everything nearby. That's not rumor. That's straight from Ordo Hereticus logs and the kind of data that gets entire sectors quarantined. The fear is so deep that even the highest echelons of the Imperium debate whether these assets are worth the risk. Malchador the Sigillite once warned the Emperor that for every blank weaponized, 100 loyal souls might be lost to fear, paranoia, or outright mutiny. The psychological cost isn't just measured in nightmares. It's measured in friendly fire, desertions, and the slow, creeping breakdown of trust. When a high-tier blank walks onto the field, the only guarantee is that nothing, friend or foe, will ever be the same again. At the very top of this tier, rumors swirl about containment procedures so extreme they border on myth. Stories of null assets so powerful that the only solution is total evacuation, psychic quarantine, or, if all else fails, exterminatus. Whether those stories are true or just another layer of Imperial paranoia, one thing is certain. The higher you climb on the blank power ladder, the tighter the leash, and the bigger the explosion, if it ever snaps. Elite and legendary blanks are where the galaxy's worst ideas get their funding. If you thought a high-tier Culexus was scary, try weaponizing entire squads, or better yet, building your own from scratch. The Sisters of Silence have a playbook for this. Their black ship records read like a horror anthology, entire holds packed with psychers, every last one reduced to gibbering silence as null squads walk the decks. When they say 100% suppression, they mean it. No psychic activity, no demonic whispers, not even a bad dream gets through. The only thing left is the sound of your own heart, and even that starts to feel optional after a while. But humanity didn't invent the art of the null. The Necrons were running this experiment while our ancestors were still figuring out fire. Illuminor Saris, the mad scientist of the Necron dynasties, spent millennia in his gene labs trying to crack the code for a perfect pariah. His prototypes could erase demons, warp storms, and occasionally the unfortunate test subjects standing next to them. Only a handful survived the process, most just unraveled, taking chunks of reality with them. Ancient Stelae talk about godlike blanks who could silence an entire battlefield, but the cost was usually catastrophic. Reality fractures, psychic dead zones, or in the worst cases, planets that had to be quarantined or wiped out. The Imperium still digs up these relics from time to time, hoping for a miracle and usually getting a disaster. Every attempt to mass-produce a legendary null ends the same way. Containment breach, emergency lockdown, and a lot of Inquisitors pretending nothing happened. If you're lucky, the fallout is just a haunted starship. If not, you get a new entry in the Codex Anathema, and maybe a fresh exterminatus order for good measure. In the end, the lesson is always the same. Tampering with the fabric of the warp is a game you only win by not playing. Now we hit the ceiling, the apocalyptic godlike blank. This is where the Imperium's nightmares start taking notes. Forget the Culexus assassins and their tidy little kill orders. Apocalyptic nulls are the kind of threat that makes even the Inquisition reach for the exterminatus button. You want numbers? Try kilometer-scale dead zones, where psychic power isn't just muted, it's erased. No astropathic signals, no demonic whispers, no psychic anything. Just a silence so total it feels like the universe itself is holding its breath. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica keeps a playbook for this, the Codex Anathema. If an Emperor-class null ever appears, the first step is mass evacuation. The second is total psychic quarantine. The third, if containment fails, you glass the planet and hope the warp doesn't notice. These aren't regular blanks with a bad attitude. We're talking about theoreticals like the Star Child Manifest, blanks so potent they could snuff out the Astronomicon or kill a god outright. The Ordo Hereticus files these under, pray you never meet one. Even black ships, those floating prisons for psychos, are built to handle the worst. Their containment decks can go utterly dead, hundreds of meters, sometimes more, where not even the Emperor's tower works. Rumors swirl about a null outbreak so severe that entire ships vanish or reality tears open and refuses to close. The official response? Quarantine the sector, erase the records, and hope nobody asks questions. At this level, the Imperium's only real weapon is ignorance. Nobody knows how many apocalyptic nulls have existed. Maybe none. Maybe more than the Administratum will ever admit. What's certain is that if one ever slips the leash, the only thing left is a dead world and a blank entry in the archives. In the Warhammer 40,000 universe, only 1 in a billion humans is born with the pariah gene, a fact confirmed across Imperial records. This documentary has traced the path from baseline humanity, through sanctioned Culexus squads, to the near-mythical Sisters of Silence and apocalyptic anomalies capable of reality fractures. Each step up the null hierarchy is documented in field reports, casualty logs, and archived black ship manifests. Yet the Imperium continues to classify key files on legendary and godlike nulls, leaving gaps in our full understanding. Despite centuries of experimentation and control, the consequences of deploying such power remain unpredictable, as shown by Exterminatus' fallback orders and the persistent secrecy in Codex Anathema. The evidence is clear. In a galaxy built on extremes, nulls serve as both shield and threat. Their existence proves that in Warhammer 40,000, power is never without cost, and true control may always be out of reach. And hey, if you want to learn more horrors from our favorite fictional universe, check this out.